The studio was dark, except for the deliberate glow of strategically placed lights. A single red light, steady and insistent, blinked into life at the precise moment the broadcast was about to begin. In that instant, the air seemed to thicken, charged with the unspoken promise of a conversation that would stretch far beyond the confines of routine talk shows. It was as if the studio itself was holding its breath in anticipation of the ideas about to be unleashed. At the center of this charged atmosphere sat a renowned liberal talk show host. Known for her incisive wit and relentless pursuit of truth, she had built her career on asking the uncomfortable questions and challenging those in power. Today, her reputation for a no-holds-barred approach was on full display. Dressed in a tailored suit that balanced authority and approachability, she leaned forward in her sleek, modern chair. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, were fixed on the guest seated across from her, a man whose very name evoked visions of the future and a reputation that was as divisive as it was celebrated. Elon Musk, the billionaire inventor and entrepreneur, sat calmly with his hands resting loosely on his knees. His dark blazer, simple yet elegant, did little to hide the aura of unflappable confidence that surrounded him. Musk's presence was magnetic, a blend of visionary calm and subtle defiance. He exuded an air of quiet authority, a man who had weathered more public storms than most and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least transformed. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable, and in that moment, every eye in the studio and every viewer at home was riveted by his presence. As the red, live light pulsed, the host began in a tone that was both respectful and challenging. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice resonating with the weight of countless debates, "you've been called many things: a visionary, a disruptor, a force of nature in the modern world. Yet, amid the accolades, critics argue that your business practices and recent political stances raise serious ethical questions. They claim that, in your relentless pursuit of innovation, you may be prioritizing profits over people. How do you respond to those who accuse you of sacrificing ethical considerations at the altar of progress?" For a moment, the studio fell into a contemplative silence. The host's carefully chosen words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown before Musk. The audience, a mix of loyal supporters and critical observers, leaned in closer, eager to witness how the billionaire would navigate this pointed challenge. Musk allowed himself a brief pause, a measured moment in which he seemed to weigh not only the question but its far-reaching implications. Slowly he tilted his head, and a faint, almost enigmatic smile played at the corners of his mouth. His eyes, dark and penetrating, swept the room, as if he were assessing the very weight of public opinion. In a voice that was low and clear, he began, "I think it's perfectly natural for people to question. Questioning is the essence of progress and innovation. However, there's a crucial difference between asking questions and presuming malice. If we're going to talk about ethics, perhaps the conversation should start by asking a more fundamental question. Who controls the narrative, and for what purpose?" The host blinked, visibly taken aback by the unexpected turn. It wasn't every day that a guest not only deflected the direct criticism, but pivoted the discussion toward a larger, systemic issue. "Are you suggesting," she pressed, her tone blending curiosity with skepticism, "that there's a broader issue at work here? A matter that goes far beyond your individual actions?" Musk leaned forward again, his posture emphasizing his conviction. "Absolutely," he replied with quiet intensity. "What concerns me isn't the mere act of criticism. It's the entire mechanism through which information is controlled and manipulated. The shaping of narratives is not a benign process. It is a powerful tool that guides public perception. And when those narratives are controlled by a select few, the very fabric of our freedom begins to unravel." At that moment, the atmosphere in the studio grew palpably tense. Every viewer, whether seated in the audience or watching from home, felt as if the conversation was steering into dangerous, uncharted waters. The topic was no longer a routine interrogation of a high-profile entrepreneur. It was a challenge to the very structure of power that underpinned modern society. The host's face, known for its sharp determination, now revealed a hint of vulnerability as she struggled to reassert control over the unfolding dialogue. Quickly regaining her composure, she leaned in again. "Mr. Musk, while your point is certainly provocative, let's not stray too far from the specifics. We're discussing decisions like reducing your workforce, your controversial stance on free speech, and even some of the alliances you've chosen to forge. Are you suggesting that the backlash you face isn't solely a reaction to these decisions, but rather part of an orchestrated, broader narrative?" Musk reclined slightly in his chair, his expression remaining composed even as his eyes conveyed an unyielding resolve. He said slowly, "That what people end up believing is not always based on objective truth. More often than not, it is determined by the narratives that are fed to them. Consider the state of the media today. How often do we see balanced, unbiased reporting? And conversely, how frequently are voices that challenge the prevailing consensus dismissed as extremist or misinformed?" A murmur ran through the studio, and the host raised a skeptical eyebrow. "So you're claiming that you're not just a target of criticism, but a victim of media manipulation? That the information we consume is less about truth and more about shaping a particular worldview?" Musk's tone grew even more measured, his voice resonating with the conviction of someone who had seen behind the curtain. "It's not just about me," he stated firmly. "The question isn't whether I'm a victim. It's about who decides what you are allowed to believe. When a small group controls the flow of information, they also control the boundaries of acceptable discourse. And once that control is established, freedom itself begins to wither away. It's as simple as that. When information is controlled, freedom dies." The host exhaled sharply. Her next words, which had been meticulously prepared for this very moment, now seemed insufficient in the face of Musk's sweeping declaration. "That's a bold statement, Mr. Musk," she said slowly. "But let's address the practical concerns. People are worried about the proliferation of misinformation on platforms like yours. Don't you think that some degree of control is necessary to prevent harmful content from spreading?" A slight, wry smile curved Musk's lips, a smile that suggested he was about to dismantle a common assumption with carefully chosen words. "Control," he mused, "is a concept that is far more complex than it appears. The critical question is, control in whose hands? Who gets to decide what counts as misinformation? In my view, when you grant a small group the power to define truth, you are effectively giving them a weapon that can be used not only to suppress dissent, but also to stifle innovation and manipulate public opinion." At that moment, the dynamics in the studio shifted perceptibly. The host's confidence, which had so far been unwavering, began to waver as she realized the conversation was evolving into a profound ideological confrontation. Her prepared questions, which had once seemed bulletproof, were now in disarray. The audience, whether in the studio or at home, could feel the gravity of what was unfolding. A battle not just of words, but of ideologies. Musk, sensing the turning tide, leaned in even closer. His eyes sharpened as his voice dropped to a deliberate, almost conspiratorial tone. "Here's the real danger," he said slowly. "When media conglomerates and powerful institutions align, they create not just a story, but an illusion of consensus. They don't merely report the news, they shape reality itself. And once reality is controlled, freedom isn't just at risk, it's effectively extinguished. The host shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "That sounds like conspiracy talk, Mr. Musk," she countered, her tone a blend of skepticism and caution. "Are you suggesting that there's a coordinated effort, a systematic manipulation designed to control the world?" Musk's eyes held hers steadily. "I'm not here to peddle conspiracy theories," he replied evenly, "but to highlight a very real problem. Our system isn't designed with true transparency or accountability. Consider this. How many times have we seen a story break, only for it to be debunked weeks, months, or even years later? By that time, the damage is done. People remember the original lie, not the later correction. And those responsible for propagating those falsehoods rarely, if ever, face any consequences." For a long moment, silence reigned in the studio. The camera zoomed in subtly, capturing every nuance of the host's troubled expression as she struggled to regain control of the narrative. Finally, her voice returned, firmer than before. "But isn't that precisely why platforms like yours are under such intense scrutiny? If unchecked information can spread like wildfire, doesn't that make you partly responsible for the chaos?" Musk's reply was calm and measured, his gaze unflinching. "Fact-checking is absolutely vital, but only when it's done impartially. What we are witnessing today is not true balanced fact-checking, it's selective enforcement. You don't have to silence every dissenting voice to control the narrative. In fact, you just need to silence enough of them so that alternative viewpoints appear isolated, even anomalous. That's how consensus is manufactured." The host paused, visibly grappling with the implications of his words. "So, in effect, you're saying that by criticizing your own platform, you're indirectly condemning the very practice of controlled narrative?" Musk offered a slight nod, his expression acknowledging the inherent paradox. "Social media is far from perfect," he conceded, "but it remains one of the few spaces where people can freely challenge the status quo. The answer isn't to impose more censorship, but to demand more transparency. If we begin to police ideas, to dictate what can or cannot be discussed, then innovation dies, and when innovation dies, progress stalls." A heavy pause settled over the studio as the weight of his words sank in. The host glanced down at her notes for a brief moment, her mind racing to find a way to steer the conversation back toward more familiar territory. "But if we remove all gatekeepers, aren't we left with chaos? Without anyone filtering harmful content, isn't there a risk that misinformation will run rampant unchecked?" Musk leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful as he considered the question. "There's a delicate balance to be struck," he admitted. "Gatekeeping, when done correctly and impartially, is crucial. But the problem arises when gatekeeping becomes a tool for enforcing a specific agenda. It's not that we should have no gatekeepers at all. Rather, we should have gatekeepers who are accountable, transparent, and truly impartial." The host's eyes narrowed as she digested his words, the tension in the studio mounting as the discussion began to take on an almost philosophical tone. "So you're not advocating for a free-for-all, but rather for a reformed system? One that encourages debate without stifling dissent?" "Exactly," Musk replied, his voice firm yet empathetic. "I'm not here to tell people what to think. I want people to think, to question, to learn, and to speak up. Freedom is not something that is granted once and for all. It's something we build, brick by brick, every single day. And if we're not careful, the walls we believe are protecting us can become the very barriers that trap us." For a long, reflective moment, the studio sat enveloped in a heavy silence. Even the host, known for her razor-sharp responses, appeared momentarily disarmed by the profundity of Musk's reflections. After what seemed like an eternity, she slowly spoke again, her voice tinged with both awe and uncertainty. "Mr. Musk, with all that you've said, What exactly do you want people to take away from this conversation? What concrete action should we be taking? Musk's eyes softened as he regarded her, then the camera, as if addressing each individual viewer directly. "I'm not here to provide a checklist of instructions," he said carefully, "but rather to ignite a spirit of inquiry. I want people to start asking the hard questions, questions that challenge the narratives fed to them day after day. Every decision we make, every piece of information we consume, shapes the world we're creating for the future. The real question isn't just about who controls power, it's about whether we are willing to accept responsibility for our own beliefs and actions." The studio lights seemed to glow a little brighter, illuminating the earnest expression on Musk's face as his words resonated with a quiet, desperate hope. The host, now visibly softened by his impassioned plea, leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a rare moment of introspection. "So if I understand correctly, you're saying that the revolution we need isn't fought on the streets or in the boardrooms. It's fought in our minds, through our willingness to challenge what we're told, to question the narratives, and to hold ourselves accountable?" "Exactly," Musk affirmed, his voice filled with quiet determination. "The battle for truth is not one waged with weapons or force. It is waged with ideas, with open debate, with a willingness to question even the most deeply entrenched beliefs. If we surrender our ability to think critically, if we become complacent with the half-truths we're given, then we surrender not just our freedom to decide, but our freedom itself." The conversation had now taken on a gravity that seemed to suspend time. Every word was laden with implications that reached far beyond the confines of a television interview. The host, her earlier defiance tempered now by a reflective calm, asked in a voice barely above a whisper, "Mr. Musk, what do you want us to do as individuals in our everyday lives to reclaim our power to question and to decide?" Musk's eyes met hers steadily, and for a moment it felt as if the entire studio was transfixed by his next words. "I want you to start by questioning everything," he said slowly. "Don't accept information at face value. Verify it, debate it, and most importantly, do not be satisfied with the surface-level answers that are spoon-fed to you. It is only by actively engaging with the information, by holding those in power accountable, and by demanding transparency from every institution that you can begin to reclaim your own power." His final words seemed to echo around the studio, each syllable resonating with the promise of change. "If you've made it this far," he continued, leaning in close enough that his words seemed to speak directly to every viewer's heart, take a moment and ask yourself, who controls what you believe, and are you truly willing to find out the truth? In that moment, the red, live light dimmed as the screen faded to black. For several long minutes, the studio remained silent, an echo of the profound ideas that had been exchanged. The audience, now left to grapple with the weight of what they had heard, sat in stunned silence. Conversations would later erupt on social media, in living rooms, and around dinner tables, as people tried to process the chilling reality check that had just been delivered. In the days that followed, the interview took on a life of its own. Analysts dissected every frame, every pause, every inflection of Musk's measured responses. Social media erupted with debates. Some hailed his insights as a necessary wake-up call in an age of curated information, while others dismissed it as nothing more than provocative rhetoric. Yet, regardless of the spectrum of opinions, one thing was clear. The conversation had ignited a fire in the hearts of many, a spark that would compel them to look deeper into the systems of power that governed their lives. Scholars and media experts referenced the interview in lectures and articles debating the ethical responsibilities of those who controlled the flow of information. In academic institutions, classrooms buzzed with discussions about the nature of truth and the importance of questioning even the most established narratives. The host herself, once known solely for her combative interviewing style, began to reflect publicly on the profound ideas that had been exchanged that evening, acknowledging that perhaps the true challenge was not in holding others accountable, but in holding ourselves accountable to the relentless pursuit of truth. In boardrooms, tech executives and policymakers convened to debate how best to balance the need for regulation with the imperative of free expression. The conversation had transcended the boundaries of a simple television interview. It had become a clarion call for a broader societal introspection about the role of media, technology, and ultimately each individual's responsibility in safeguarding freedom. Months later, in a quiet interview with a respected publication, the host recalled that night with a mixture of pride and introspection. "I've interviewed countless figures over the years," she said softly, "but never before had I encountered a moment when the conversation shifted so profoundly from the personal to the philosophical. That night, I realized that our struggle for truth is not about any one person or platform. It's about the collective willingness of all of us to question, to learn, and to engage with the world on a deeper level." And so, the legacy of that night endured. It became a symbol of a turning point, a moment when the boundaries between business, politics, and philosophy blurred, leaving behind a challenge that was both deeply personal and universally resonant. A challenge to never stop questioning, to always seek the truth, and to remember that freedom is not a given, but a constant, hard-fought endeavor. As the debate continued to evolve across the nation, one phrase stood out like a beacon amid the murk of manipulated narratives. "Who controls what you believe, and are you willing to find out?" It was a question that resonated not only with the disillusioned, but with anyone who valued the fundamental right to think independently. And in that question lay the hope that one day, through relentless inquiry and unyielding determination, the walls built by those who sought to control the narrative would crumble, paving the way for a future defined not by censorship or complacency, but by the unassailable power of truth. In the end, that fateful conversation was more than an exchange of words. It was a turning point. It reminded everyone that while powerful institutions may seek to shape reality by controlling information, the ultimate weapon against tyranny is the human spirit's unyielding quest for knowledge. And in that quest, each person must become both guardian and seeker of truth. If this narrative has challenged you to question the stories you are told and inspired you to seek a deeper understanding of the world, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that the fight for truth is a fight for our collective freedom, subscribe to our channel and join us in continuing to ask the hard questions. Together, we can build a future where truth, transparency, and genuine dialogue light the way. Thank you so much for your likes, shares, and support. Every like and share helps our channel grow and reach more amazing viewers like you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. Your support means the world to us.